Hello, friends. Welcome to the Wisdom Journey. My name is Elizabeth. Today we're on day 25, covering Proverbs 25. So from Proverbs 25 to Proverbs 29, things change up a little bit. And that's that these are collections that a king collected from King Solomon. So Solomon is still the author. But let's see, verse 1 says, "These two are Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of King Hezekiah of Judah copied." So King Hezekiah was king of Judah 250 years after King Solomon. And within that span of 250 years, you should already guess there was a whole lot of drama. And you would read that in the Old Testament, I think in Kings and Chronicles and maybe and Samuel. And so, ups and downs, kings that obeyed God, kings that disobeyed God. And so then King Hezekiah comes in. I believe his father was a really evil man. He comes in and starts cleaning shop, cleaning house, restoring their faith, their culture. And so then he is compelled to gather these proverbs, King Solomon's additional proverbs, and I'm not sure if it was prophet Isaiah that had him do that, or Micah. But nonetheless, it was his task. He did this, him and his scribes and his men. And so we have chapters 25 through 29. All right. So let's get started. In verse 2, it is the glory of God to conceal a matter, and the glory of kings to investigate a matter. That's kind of really intriguing. And the heavens are high and the earth is deep, so the hearts of kings cannot be investigated. So research on that is that we know that we cannot understand God, right? So God he is just transcendental outside of time. So he can reveal to us what he wants to reveal to us, conceal to us what we want to conceal, what he wants to conceal to us. And it's up to the kings to investigate, to discover, to look into wisdom like King Solomon did, to understand these matters. And then the other verse, as the heavens are high and the earth is deep, so are the hearts of kings cannot be investigated. So there's two things there that I did research on, or two things that came out of that. One was that that sometimes like King Solomon would had God's wisdom, so people cannot really understand him or really try to what is it called? Like try to trap him. They try to bribe him and it wouldn't work. So it was just like, man, we can't get to this king, right? So the hearts of kings cannot be investigated. So that was one thing. And then the other thing is, yeah, sometimes another way that like not godly kings, you may want to win them over this way and win them over that way, and we cannot. Only God can see their hearts. So those are things that came out of that one. Verse 4, remove impurities from silver and material will be produced for a silversmith. Remove the wicked from the king's presence, and his throne will be established in righteousness. Remove impurities from silver, and the materials will be produced. I just did a little research on the process because we should be going through that process. God is going to be removing impurities from us. But if you do a little research on the process of removing impurities from silver, it's a really detailed, tough, long, lots of heating process. And that's what God does for us. So sometimes we want things to be fast, right? And it's a process, right, for God to transform us. Okay, so I have the next verse is verse 6. Okay, don't boast about yourself before the king, and don't stand in the place of the great, for it is better for him to say to you, come up here, than to demote you in plain view of a noble. So that sometimes our ego, we want to be in places that we shouldn't be, and trying to just kind of say act like we're bigger than we are. But I'm gonna go to Luke 14 because it's very similar to a parable that Jesus shared. Let's see, Luke 14. I have it ready. Verse 7. I'm going to start off at verse 7. So Jesus was saying a parable, and he told a parable to those who were invited when he noticed how they would choose the best places for themselves. And then he says, when you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, don't recline at the best place because a more distinguished person than you may have been invited by your host. The one who invited both of you may come and say to you, give your place to this man. And then in humiliation, you will proceed to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and recline in the lowest place, so that when the one who invited you comes, he will say to you, friend, move up here, move up higher. You will then be honored in the presence of all the other guests. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, and the one who humbles himself will be exalted. He also said to the one who had invited him, when you give him a lunch or dinner, don't invite your friends, your brothers or your sisters, your relatives, or your rich neighbors, because they might invite you back and you would be repaid. On the contrary, when you host a banquet, invite those who are poor, maimed, lame, or blind. But there you see that it's the same reference. So one, Jesus read the Old Testament. And so he was very familiar, he was, familiar with God's word. He used to fight temptation. When he was younger, that his mom and dad couldn't find him, he was like, I was at church, talking and learning to the priest there. So this is interesting, right? How it's the same verse, the same idea from Proverbs, and it just says like, let's wait for other people to honor us, right? We can't really honor ourselves. Then the other verse, so something very similar to this is verse 21 and 22 in Proverbs, verse 21 and 22. It's this way. If your enemy is hungry, give him food to eat. And if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head, and the Lord will reward you. So that is also written in Romans 12:7. So, I'm starting off at Romans 12:7. So let's just read along with me here. Okay. If service, use it in service. If teaching in teaching, exhorting in exhorting, giving with generosity, leading with diligence, showing mercy with cheerfulness. I'm sorry, and this is Paul speaking. Let love be without hypocrisy. Detest evil, cling to what is good, love one another deeply as brothers and sisters. Outdo one another in showing honor. Do not lack diligence and zeal. Be fervent in spirit. Serve the Lord. Rejoice in hope. Be patient in afflictions. Be persistent in prayer. Share with the saints in their needs. Pursue hospitality. Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse. Rejoice with those who rejoice. Weep with those who weep. Live in harmony with one another. Do not be proud. Instead, associate with the humble. Do not be wise in your own understanding. Do not repay any evil one for evil. Give careful though to do what, be careful thought to do what is honorable in everyone's eyes. If possible, as far as it depends on you, live at peace with everyone. Friends, do not avenge yourself. Instead, leave room for God's wrath, because it is written, vengeance belongs to me. I will repay, says the Lord. But if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For in doing so, you will be heaping fiery coals on his head. Do not be conquered by evil, but conquer evil with good. So here, Paul was quoting Proverbs 20, 21, and 22, which I think it's really cool. I had seen that, and I had never really linked it, right? So that's what he says, because it is written, vengeance belongs to me. I will repay. That's in Proverbs. And we've been seeing how God doesn't even want us to make fun of the people that are receiving their judgment. And then he says, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him something to drink. For in doing so, you will be heaping fiery coals on his head. So always pray right before you feed your enemy. And but it's really interesting for the next phrase, you will be heaping fiery coals on his head. So I grew up thinking that yeah, it was really weird. It's like, okay, so if you're good to someone, then what, their head is gonna be burning. And so it was kind of funny, like you're so good to them and that they're gonna like hate you, like, oh man, why are they beating me, and it makes their head burn. It's kind of interesting, right? So I was doing research on that. So it says it's two things it can be, right? One is, yeah, that people's, when they're your enemies and they've been mean to you and just unfair to you, and then you do good things, that it's their conscience that's going to be burning, like in shame, like, oh man, right? So they're not really going to literally be burning, right? Or the other thing was that in those times, fire was so important. And so that, people needed it to warm their house, they needed it to cook. And so that's the best gift you can give someone, is hot coals. So then they can now put it in their fire and get the fire going. So that's what it was. Is like, if you're good to them, you feed them when they've been your enemy, it's like you were gifting them this precious fire that they need to warm their house and make food for their family. So he said that back in the day, that they would um transfer these hot coals in baskets or certain containers, and they would carry them on their head. Now, do your research, right? But it's like they would carry on their head, and I think they would go through the streets and they would even resell, like, hey, anybody want some hot coals to start your fire? And so that was golden. And that's what you're giving them, gifts. So I think I'm more in line with that one. It seems more, cool and nice and generous, right? So anyways, I wanted to share that with you because I always thinking like, it's so weird. All right, so let's go to verse 12 of Proverbs 25. Verse 12 is a wise correction, a wise correction to a receptive ear is like gold rings or an ornament of gold. I have here in this translation, verse 12 is, when you humbly receive correction, it adorns your life with beauty and makes you a better person. Okay, that's why I wanted to read it here. It makes you a better person. Why are we here? Why are we doing this 31-day Bible challenge? Is it just because we like Bible study? Okay, that could be okay. But really, we're doing it because we want to become a better person. We want to change. We can't do Bible study just for Bible study's sake. Yeah, you probably know a lot of those people. It's like, hey, for some reason they have lots of Bibles and they know a lot, but they're just not changing. So let's not be those people. Let's be people that can take correction humbly, right? That's going to make our life beautiful and make us a different person. So after 31 days, I really would like to hear also, like, where do you think you changed? What has been aha moments that is like, hey, I'm not going to go back. You've had revelation. All right, let's see. Verse 17, I thought was funny because it says, seldom set foot in your neighbor's house, otherwise he'll get sick of you and hate you. I just thought that we should be better at learning cues, social cues. And so sometimes we just either we borrow something from friends too much, or there's just something that we do and we don't have social, we don't really know how to read people, or we tend to ignore them. Let's not be that person. Let's really be mindful and learn to communicate and read body language. I thought that was interesting, right? Let's see, verse 18, a person giving false testimony against his neighbor is like a club, a sword, or a sharp arrow. So here it's like talking bad about your neighbor, gossiping, and it's saying how drastic it is. It's like using a sword, using a sharp arrow, hurting people. And you know that saying, stick and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. Well, that's false. Words can hurt you and they can stay with you for years and years. And remember we said, hey, words are either can give life or give death. So again, that's just to remind us of what's coming out of our mouth. I thought it was funny, verse 20, singing songs to a troubled heart is taking off clothing on a cold day, or like pouring vinegar on soda. It's like, what? Right? And so doing more research, it has to do with, someone that is grieving, someone that is sad, and you trying to force them to be happy. You're trying to sing to them, their troubled heart, and they're just not ready for it, right? So we have to be mindful of people's spirit. And like I've said in the past, like God will give you the discernment. How do I reach my brother and sister? And sometimes you just have to grieve or mourn with them. Something that I know from coaching is that a lot of people that don't want you to go through that grief, like we're like, you be happy, don't, let me cheer you up. It's usually because they don't know how to manage that emotion. They don't know how to deal with it. And it's usually because they haven't dealt with their own emotion, and they just feel so uncomfortable. They're like, no, don't cry, right? Versus when someone's really in tune with their emotions, they're okay with crying. And they're like, hey, you need to cry. You need to grieve. No, you need to process this, right? So sometimes it's like it's a little selfish when you want people to be happy right away. Like, hey, shake it off. There's a time. There's a time for everything, right? But I just thought it was interesting because this verse is just so visually captivating, right? Okay, let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, verse 24 again. I think there's 5 times that King Solomon talks about the contentious woman. Better to live on, again, corner of the roof than to share a house with a nagging wife. It's like, okay, we get it. Let's not be nagging wives or men anymore, right? But I mean, in all honesty, women, we tend to like nag a little bit more. So one of the things I was thinking about is like putting, like reversing the roles. Imagine if your husband or if your wife, if you're the nagger, right? So now imagine what you're doing to him or her. If they would do it to you, how would that make you feel, right? That'd be terrible. I mean, I think let's marinate on that for a couple of days, right? Get in their shoes. What if someone was constantly nagging at you? And I'm just going to leave that there for today. And I think that wraps up 25, chapter 25. All right. So God bless you. Hope you got something out of this. And I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.